Hey there.
Hey, how's it going, Fab?
Good yourself?
Good. As you can tell, I'm at the beach house still.
Nice. That's fun. You can tell I'm still in my basement.
Oh, your basement. It's your lair.
My lair. Yes.
Your music, your
Um,
music and business lair.
yes. Mainly business. The music, unfortunately, not so much. Cool. All right. Today, you wanted to kind of take a step back to basics. You kind of called it, which I kept. I liked it. You want to talk about prospecting, which is, you're right. This is something we used to talk a lot about in the early days for the original listeners up there. um, but something that we haven't talked about much. So I think it'd be interesting. I agree. I think it'd be interesting to bring that topic back. What? How do you want to set the table here?
Well, I think you said table well. We used to talk about a lot, and we kind of we've moved forward. We've moved more in depth on specific subjects, but I wanted to come back to prospecting because what I'm hearing with the companies that I'm working with and the leaders that I'm working with and the reps that I'm working with and the sales leaders I'm working with is that it's always a thing that gets pushed to the wayside. And I mean, as you know, I kind of like to break things down, and you and I have talked about this before, and you kind of know where I'm going when I'm saying this. But prospecting to me has two. Uh, there are two big categories, or two things that you want to look at when prospecting, and one is preparation. So what do you do to prepare to prospect, and then what do you do when you're executing your prospecting?
Mm-hmm.
And preparation, the biggest thing, and we've talked about this before, is scheduling the time, putting it in your agenda. We were just laughing, Fab and I, before offline, saying, "Well, we never schedule it," but that's probably the first and most important thing is put it in your agenda because once it's there, you're going to feel compelled, even though it's just a placeholder in your agenda, you're going to feel compelled to doing it. And we all tend
Mm-hmm.
to procrastinate. Listen, I talk about this, and I procrastinate on my prospecting too,
Yeah.
and teach this stuff. So putting it in your agenda is probably the first most important thing.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's just like preparation is well. I mean, putting in your calendar is. Yeah, I'd agree. Though it's kind of the easy part, right? Like it's still, yeah, it's easy to block off. Okay, I'm going to do it every day from 8 to 9 or whatever, whatever works for you, or vary it throughout the week. Um, is finding a way to stick to that, right? Like that makes it a little more difficult.
Yeah, I mean that's discipline, like with
Yeah.
anything else, right? And the example, because I know both you and I try to go to the gym, uh, probably not as often as we'd like to, but I don't know about you, but when I go to the gym, sometimes in the morning, I'm like, oh, I don't want to go, and then I just put the clothes on, I just go, and then it starts happening, and then I'm there for 5 minutes. I'm like, oh, I'm really happy I came,
Yeah.
and it starts feeling better. And prospecting's pretty much the same thing. It's like, oh, it's on my calendar, and then you make the first call, or you write the first email, or you send the first LinkedIn message, and you're like, hey, this is not so bad, and then you just sort of get into the groove, and
Yeah.
and that's preparation will lead to a better execution, right? Because that's the second part is execution. But the second thing in preparation I want to talk about is, yes, put it in your calendar and try to respect it. And of course, we're all human beings, and it is the thing that gets pushed off the most because no one's going to come and scream at you because you didn't do your hour prospecting. And usually, your boss or your partner or whoever it is not next to you, breathing down your neck, making sure you do your prospecting calls. But the second part of preparation, the words there is prepare what you're going to say. Like, don't just wing it.
Hmm.
Um, because if you just wing it, if it particularly if it's a call, you're gonna, there's very, and we've talked about this a lot, the conversation starter, but prepare your conversation starter and make sure that you've done it properly, and that I would say is your preparation. And one
Yeah.
thing that I think kind of overlaps. Well, first let's talk about that. Tell me about conversation starter. What's your input on that?
Um, yeah, I think I believe you're right. I mean, it's important to know what you're going to say. I think it's intimidating to go into your calls without knowing what you're going to say. Even in your emails, right? Like having your email templates ready and stuff like that. Even if it's not going to be a direct copy every time, at least you're going to have like
Guideline.
a guideline, something to go off of. And same thing for what you're going to say. Like it's daunting to go in. I think you also need to be a bit self-aware at that point. Some people I speak to, like, they like having like kind of their script, especially if they're doing a lot of Zoom calls and prospecting, or whatever, or at home in front of a computer. It's having their script in front of them, or their messaging in front of them. Others hate it. I think it's also trying out what works for you, right? Like, uh, if you watch F1, some drivers love to look at all their stats and all that, and others hate it, right? And so I think you need to be aware of what works for you. Um,
That's
yeah,
interesting, Todd, because that's really interesting because you're right. Some people are like, oh, if I analyze what I say too much or I analyze my stats, it throws me off and I get nervous. But I think, like in F1, um, if you take the time to analyze your stats and understand what it is you're doing well or not,
yeah,
it generally helps you get better.
yeah.
'Cause if you just
But
find,
I mean, like, there's a time where some people like to do it beforehand and look at what they, and others like to do like kind of
yes,
their post race or whatever, and I think
yeah,
that's important. But I think in terms of prepping your actual call, be aware. Like, some people like have to have the structure in front of them. Other people, it throws them off, right? Because the prospect is supposed to answer yes or no at that point, and then they answer something else, and they don't know where else to go in there, right? So I think preparing also means what works for you, and that, unfortunately, like, the best way to find out is by trying things out.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And there we're deep diving into a conversation started, which we've done before, which I think is important because a big part of your preparation is knowing how these things are going to move forward. And we
yeah,
could also say in your preparation, there's role plays, there's simulations, whatever it might be to get you prepared. But really,
yeah,
when I talk about prospecting, the hardest part usually is just for someone to say, okay, I'm going to do prospecting on this day, and I'm not always going to push it, because I've got to do a delivery on that day, or clients coming in and I'm taking them to lunch, so I don't have time. I got to find like we're often it's often the thing that gets pushed to the side the most often, like the gym.
yeah,
For a lot of people, those that are very devoted and committed will put it in their calendar, and you can't push it. And that's what you should
yeah,
do with prospecting too. And that's where there's an overlap. It's your state of mind. If
yeah,
you say to yourself, prospecting's just as important as talking to the client, just as important as sort of like going to the gym is just as important as eating breakfast.
yeah,
Well, then suddenly you having put it on that pedestal will make sure in that state of mind that you're going to do it. You're going to put it in your calendar, and you're going to get prepared, and you're going to make sure that you are ready to do what is necessary before you make that prospecting call.
yeah, yeah. And I think, you keep comparing it to working out, and how,
Because I
like,
haven't
at
done it in
the
3 weeks.
beginning, yeah, I feel
Because
you.
I've been on vacation. But you know what? That's okay, right? You're allowed to take a break. When you're on
Yeah,
vacation,
of
you can
course.
prospect.
But for me, like, because I'm like you, like, I don't like working out, but I do work out 3 times a week, and then when I'm there, I'm like, I'm happy I did it, and after the
Yeah.
fact, I'm happy I did it. I think what's critical, and I don't know if that comes in the preparation, or how you see that, but um, is getting finding the way to get a win, so to speak, within prospecting. Because I feel what people find difficult with prospecting is that, you get turned down a lot. You get a lot of just unanswered calls, unanswered emails. You get a lot of, right? Like, there's a lot of difficulty, and I think finding a way to find satisfaction in calling, regardless of the actual outcome of prospecting, is a critical. In the same way that you work out, and then you're like, okay, I'm
Yeah.
happy, I feel better, I have my dopamine rush, I don't have whatever. Is like, setting yourself up. I'm gonna make 10 calls, or like, whatever works for you, whatever satisfies you out of it, is critical. Because like working out, you want to be able to hop on the one thing that you like about it. It's not the lifting the weights or the running that's interesting. It's how you feel afterwards, so you can kind of hold on or grip onto that to motivate, to help motivate yourself. Same thing with prospecting. It's not necessarily the yeses and the nos. It's about, you know number of calls you'll make, or number of messages you'll leave. Whatever gets you
That's really
satisfaction.
interesting, Fab. And the way that I would the way that's very, very interesting because you said a few things there that I want to touch on. When you go to the gym, eventually if you keep going, the results going to happen. You'll get fitter, your muscles will get bigger, you'll get better on the treadmill, you'll feel better. There's a guaranteed result. Whereas
Yeah.
with prospecting, when you're starting out, you don't know. I mean, you might make 10 calls and the result won't be there. So, like you
Yeah.
just said, you need to get satisfaction from the action.
Yeah.
You need to get satisfaction from your methodology. You need to get satisfaction from the things that you control. And I
Yeah.
think we've talked about this in the past. It's action and methodology plus external factors that will give you results.
Yeah.
But in when you're prospecting, your job is not to this is going to sound outrageous, but your job is not your satisfaction level should not be based uniquely on that one-time success, because if
No.
that's the case, you're going to get turned off quickly.
Yeah.
What you need to look at the overall success rate and also how you control it. So
Yeah.
how many times you need to make those calls, how many times you need to write those emails to get that discovery call,
Yeah.
because when you're doing prospecting, all you're trying to do ultimately is get a discovery call.
Yeah.
You're just trying to get to the next step. You're not trying to close.
Yeah.
So it's all an action methodology. So, but I want to come back to prospecting because
Yeah.
that's you brought up a really interesting point there, in that if you let yourself get discouraged by the lack of results in your last prospecting session because you have unrealistic expectations, then you're going to stop doing it. It's sort of like saying, "Well, I went to the gym twice and I don't look like Arnold Schwarzenegger."
Huh.
Well, okay, well, who told you that? You've been looking at too many fake YouTube commercials. Work out once, have YouTube muscles. So that's really important. Okay, and the other thing I wanted to touch upon, it's your state of mind, which comes and touches what you expect from your prospecting.
Yeah.
So, as a seasoned prospector, and you're the same thing, if I get on and I know I'm going to make 5 calls and no one answers, and the one person answers is terribly grumpy and it doesn't happen, or the emails are it doesn't happen, I don't get discouraged because I know it's a numbers game.
Yeah.
I know that I might need to call 20 people, but usually I know that after I've spoken to about 100 people, I get one client, and that's really good for me because
Mm.
that one client might stick with me from 3 months to 2 years. So,
Mm-hmm.
I understand that now, and I get there. But when you're starting out prospecting, sometimes, like, you don't have that perspective. You don't
Yeah.
know how long it's gonna take to get those muscles. So it's a
Yeah.
very good point that you need to be realistic with your expectations. And at first, your expectations should just be based on your performance,
Yeah.
on what how often you do it and what you say.
Yeah.
Another thing I wanna bring up, um, and I want your opinion on this. It's the because there's two things in prospecting. So your whole, like, your state of mind and how you prepare and how you get ready to do it. But then when comes time to execute, when you just go into it, you need to have a good state of mind, obviously. And if your conversation starter is ready, then it's just a question of saying, okay, my state of mind, which again touches to your expectations, it's just about making these 10 calls, being as good in my conversations as I can be, or in my emails,
Mm.
and just getting them done. So if 10 calls, I don't know, 10 calls takes you an hour, then it's just for that hour to focusing. You're in a meditative state of doing your prospecting. And if you
Yeah.
do that, then you'll get the habit, and then eventually you will start to develop those prospecting muscles, and you'll start getting results, because if you focus on the action and then you keep working at your methodology, what you say, what's in your conversation starter, eventually you'll get better.
Right.
Assuming that you have a reasonable product or service for sale. If you're
Right.
selling something ridiculously stupid and useless, well, then you might not have so much success.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, exactly. I think it's, and I think as a sales leader, and obviously if it's a brand new company and you're for the sales leader and there's no data to support you, that's a little harder. But I think that's part of your role, right? Is to help set benchmarks and to be aware of where the rep is, in their first week. It's maybe a little optimistic to think they'll do 10 calls a day, right? But as
Yeah.
they progress, and maybe like your goal should be first week, it's a call a day, and then, 2 calls, or, whatever makes sense, right? Like, I think that's your role as a leader. obviously, like when you work out, to just bring back that analogy, you can work out with a trainer, and then the trainer's there with you every time you work out, and you might not be able to get that in the sales environment because we're assuming you have colleagues and you're not just the only salesperson there. But is still, as a leader, is to try to act as that trainer, that coach, the person that's there, and to remind
Absolutely.
them and to push them and to be like, okay, like look at their calendar and be like, okay, Paul, I see you've scheduled prospecting for tomorrow 8. Looking forward to hearing how that went, right? And then because then you're adding a little accountability as well, right? Like it's like, okay, it's not just in my calendar and nobody knows, and whether I cancel my own session or not, nobody will know. It's my bosses in there and they're checking things out, and they want to know how it goes, and they're not necessarily there to tell you it didn't go well, or you could do better or whatnot. It's just more to help you keep accountable, and to help you find that motivation, right? Not the motivation, but they help you find the
Help
what
you find your
motivates
own
you.
well, help you
Yeah,
find your own motivation. And I think that's a great analogy again because we've talked about this before as well. As a sales leader, you can't force anyone to do anything, and
no,
and the old threat of being fired or mistreating your employees, as seems to be the has seemed to be the case 100 years ago. It doesn't work very well in motivating people. So ultimately, what you're doing, particularly in prospecting, is you're helping the individual keep themselves accountable. You know,
yeah,
a great leader won't. Um, a great leader will help you keep yourself accountable. Will say, "Hey, Fab or Paul, what are you trying to achieve? I'm trying to achieve this, this, this. And what do you think you need to do? Well, I need to make more calls. Okay, so
right,
what does it mean? I need to prospect. So,
yeah,
Paul, how can I help you prospect? You know what I mean?
yeah,
What should we be working on? So it's like the good coach at the gym. Hey, why are you here, Fab? Well, I want to get my cardio to be better, and I want to have the body I had when I was 25 years old. Okay, well, what does that mean? Well, I was a bodybuilder and I had huge muscles and whatever. I could run a marathon. Okay, then that's your motivation. I'm going to help you get there. You know,
yeah,
the it's not like you walk in and the sales trainer says, "Okay, Fab, I want you to do this and so many push-ups," and they have a conversation with you to understand your motivation. What's the same
right,
thing with a sales leader? You're helping your rep, or whoever it is that needs to prospect to find their motivation to do it. Because the hardest thing, you know, there are certain things that as a leader they're easier to motivate. Hey, do this, you'll get a huge spiff or whatever. That's great. But there's certain things that are harder to get people to move on, and I think prospecting is one of them. So it's got to come from you. So as a leader, you need to help that person find their own motivation to go there, and not say, if you do this prospecting, you'll make so many dollars, and you don't even know that that's their motivation,
right,
or you'll sell so many things, or your wife will think you're an expert or whatever, stupid 1950s garbage you can throw at them. So all that boils down to, you're right. As a sales leader, you have to help that individual salesperson prepare and
yeah,
execute, and
yeah,
they have to understand what does that mean. How do I
yeah,
prepare for prospect? Because some people say, "Well, I just pick up the phone and do it when I have time." That's not bad, but it's that's what does that mean? Is that you're plugging holes with your prospecting time. Oh, I've got 10 minutes here, I'll do it there. Whereas you need to put yourself in a state of mind for prospecting. You need to, be in a good state of mind, in a good mood. It's not like, hey, I'm going to jump on the spin bike for 5 minutes between this call, and then I'm going to do it 10 minutes later. Usually you're going to go on a spin bike for, I don't know, 30 minutes, and you're doing it with a specific goal in mind. Well, it should be the same thing for prospecting.
yeah. Yeah, and I think it's also about being able to be open. Some people can focus for an hour and do their prospecting. Some people might have like shorter attention spans, and maybe they'll do more sessions, but half an hour each time. Like it's like I said, everybody's different, and that's okay. There's really no cookie cutter approach. The only cookie cutter part is that you need to do it consistently. Beyond that, like if you'd rather do 3 sessions in your day of 15 minutes, or you'd rather do an hour every so often, like once or like twice a week or something, like whatever works for you. That's kind of your leader's responsibility to help your reps figure out what works for
Yep.
them. I think beyond that, like on an operational side, is putting that sales enablement hat on, and making sure that the materials available, that their email templates are there, the emails, the playbooks are loaded and ready to go, and making sure that also the data is there, right? Like tracking how many calls they're making and stuff like that, so that then we can go back and look like, hey, for every 100 call we get one customer, or something like that. I think that's important because I find like because prospecting is a little difficult and easy to push aside, I find it's also um, it's if you're not tracking things, then it makes it easier to get rid of or not to do, and I find that's one of the biggest procrastinators that I see is like reps going into like cleaning up data, rewriting scripts, rewriting email templates, right? Like all that stuff. Like, so the hour that they have scheduled for prospecting, they end up sending off one email and trying to dial a call, like, because at the end of
Yeah,
the day,
yeah.
they've wasted all their time. So I think it's all up to you as a leader to make sure that they have what they need within reason, I mean, because you could, the flip side of that is that the reps don't prospect if like all the data is not squeaky perfectly clean also. I
Well,
think
that's
you need
where
to
we
set.
touch on perfectionism, right? And that's
Yeah.
that's sheer and pure procrastination. If you could take all the hours in the world of every rep in the world, every person in the world that rewrites their scripts, that cleans up their data, that does everything instead of prospecting, you could probably increase efficiency and sales by 10% in 1 minute.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. And so that's why I think, operationally, I think for prospecting, operationalizing is really critical, to help avoid procrastination, or at least remove one of the excuses, which is like my things are not ready. And again, it depends. Some reps don't want any of that, but I'd be weary of all the reps that don't want things, because I'm weary of reps that are like, I don't want to log my calls, I don't want to log my emails, I don't want to do this. I mean, sure, they might they might be your top rep and have a full pipeline. There's still big question marks at the end of the day on all that, right? Because you're like,
Totally.
how is this getting it done?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
What's the health of that pipeline? Stuff like that. So,
Absolutely.
to me, enablement and operation is key in prospecting as a leader, right? To enable your reps
I think even as a rep, I mean, again, I would say if you don't operationalize your system, if you don't first of all, you need to be able to break down what you do. You need to understand and break down into parts. And if you do that properly, then you're in a state where you can operationalize it. And if as a rep you don't understand the advantage of operationalizing it, then you're missing the boat, because that's really what helps you repeat um, good behavior, understand good behavior, um, uh, read the data to help you get better every time. And we don't just want to operationalize. We do it to help you get better and understand the data that is being accumulated, because you've done a proper registering of the operations that you do, the activities you do, and the way you use it. And if that's in a you know, I've talked, obviously you're a HubSpot guy, but we've talked about this a lot. If your CRM's there as a sales assistant to help you do the right things at the right time. So if it represents your strategy and it understands, because you've put in the data, and you understand what's going on from that. Well, the fact that you operationalized it is just amazing, because then it helps you move forward, and you'll understand why you're going off the track. Whereas if you operationalize nothing and just fly by the seat of your pants as an extreme, well, then you don't know why it didn't go well. I did 10 calls today. Oh, what went wrong? I don't know. It was a bad day, you know. But all
um,
this stuff that we talk about, that should live in your CRM, and if you operationalize it properly through playbooks, through understanding, looking at data, then you'll get a hell of a lot better.
Yeah, and you can even get down to the nitty gritty, making sure that the sales tasks are up to, because I've seen that also.
Absolutely.
It's like, oh yeah, I've set tasks for myself, and you go into their task queue, and there's like 1,003 past due tasks. Like all that stuff that makes it more difficult for reps to actually get the stuff done is critical. And I think I from what I see, that's one of the things that as a sales leader is often neglecting it, is making sure that the reps have the process to get that down, and it's not necessarily about flow charts and stuff like that, but it's like, your tasks up to date. How are you segmenting your tasks? Like, do you know who you need to reach out to? Who you reached out to? Do who's in your pipeline already? Do like all those things? Then all your email templates, your playbooks, like
Yeah.
anything that you need to get it done. And that's an ongoing thing, right? Like you'll work with somebody like you to get those playbooks up and running, but then it's also up to you to like review the utility. Like, this, are these playbooks working? What didn't work this time? Like, why are you not using it? I'm not using it because the messaging is all off. Okay, let's review the messaging. We'll sit with marketing. We had an episode about a month ago with Alyssa about marketing for recruitment, but marketing can help with the messaging and help write stuff. I think to me that's a bigger part of the sales leadership job when it comes to prospecting, is helping your team stay motivated and find their motivation, but enabling them as well, removing any barriers that they might have. And those creep in really quickly and really easily for when leaders are not very much focused on it.
That's very, very true. And you have, as a leader too, you've got to identify what's a true barrier and what's just procrastination.
Yeah,
And in
yeah,
prospecting, for most of us, leaders and representatives, it's procrastination. So
yeah. Yeah, it's awkward. It's not fine. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of layers for everybody involved, right? Like I know calling and all that can be intimidating. I know sales leaders sometimes feel a lot of imposter syndrome because they know they don't like prospecting, so they find that they have a hard time uh, keeping reps accountable to prospecting, and it becomes this vicious cycle. But I think it's critical at the end of the day. That as a leader, you help your reps find their motivation, stay accountable, and clear the path.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely, totally agree, 100%.
All right. Well, Paul, this has been a good back to basic, probably a good first episode in a month almost that we've
Yeah,
recorded. Um, this is fun.
yeah, it was fun. I think it's good to get back to basics. And you know, one thing, if I had to summarize this, you did a great summary, but if I had to summarize it from my end, I'd say beware of procrastination. If you operationalize it properly, if you understand your data, if you prepare before you're prospecting, then you'll be a lot better at executing. And
Yeah.
those two come together, and it's a state of mind, but it's also understanding the moving parts. We went on a lot of little tangents today that affect your prospecting. That's because you and I understand it, but as a salesperson, if you get to understand those things, and as a sales leader, if you understand those things, you'll help your salespeople do the right thing.
Yeah. All right.
All right,
Yep. All right. Take care, Paul. That was fun.
take care, Fab.
All right.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.